A giant robot only stops a monster from the inside if a person is still breathing when it happens. Every Jaeger ever built runs on a mind linked to another mind, which means someone always pays the fee the machine can't cover. So when the biggest, strongest one they'll ever build finally meets its match, the question isn't what kind of engineering wins. Gypsy Danger, the most powerful weapon against the end of the world, was already obsolete the day it walked into battle. That is not an insult. That is the entire point. Gypsy Danger is a Mark III, built when the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps still trusted nuclear power over plasma cores, and by the time the story starts, the military has moved on to something else entirely. Newer Jaegers run digital neural interfaces, sleek and fast and modern. Gypsy Danger runs analog, the Jaeger equivalent of showing up to a gunfight with a machine that predates the gun. Here is what that actually means in practice. Gypsy Danger stands around 79 to 80 meters tall and weighs over 2,000 tons, carrying twin retractable chainswords and forearm-mounted plasma casters, all of it powered by an actual nuclear reactor bolted straight into its chest. Every newer Jaeger left that design behind, and for good reason. Nuclear reactors are heavy, slow to retrofit, and if something goes wrong, catastrophic in ways nobody wants to explain to Command. Command wanted Gypsy Danger decommissioned, not celebrated. On paper, it was a museum piece waiting for the scrapyard. Then the kaiju start winning, and the flaw becomes the feature. Digital Jaegers get fried the moment an EMP hits, dropping out of the fight like unplugged toasters. Gypsy Danger keeps standing. Its outdated analog system cannot be hacked, cannot be shorted, cannot be switched off by anything short of physically tearing it apart, because it was never wired to the kind of network that modern warfare assumes you need. The same obsolescence that got it mocked in a briefing room becomes the exact thing that carries it through a fight nothing else in the fleet survives. 2 pilots have to run it, and that is not a technicality you can shrug past. Raleigh Beckett and Mako Mori do not just operate Gypsy Danger, they drift with it, which means sharing every memory, every fear, every dead sibling and dead mother wired directly into each other's skulls so the machine can move like one body instead of 2. That is the cost, baked into every Jaeger from the start. You do not get the power without opening your mind to someone else and trusting them not to break you with what they find. And in the end, the obsolete relic does something no sleek modern Jaeger in this film manages to pull off. It rides into the breach, drops into the one place built to kill it, and overcharges its own nuclear heart until it goes off from the inside, taking the portal with it. The weapon that was too old, too heavy, too analog for anyone's taste turns out to be the only machine willing to die on purpose to finish the job. That is the bet the whole franchise keeps making, over and over. Build something massive enough, armored enough, advanced enough to outmuscle the apocalypse, and hope the pilot inside it survives being the trigger. Gypsy Danger wins that bet by being the least impressive machine in the fleet on paper, and the only one willing to pay the full price when it actually counts. But if an obsolete nuclear relic can close the breach, what happens when you build the opposite? The fastest, deadliest, most advanced war machine ever made, designed for the sole purpose of ending the war. Stryker Eureka. The most advanced killing machine on the planet spends its entire existence being built for a war it ends by blowing itself up. That is not a twist ending. That is the design brief. Stryker Eureka is a Mark V. Everything before it in the fleet is a rough draft by comparison. Built in Australia and handed to the PPDC as the last word in Jaeger engineering, it is faster than Cherno Alpha, sleeker than Gypsy Danger, and armed with wrist-mounted sting blades plus a chest cavity full of cluster missiles that can turn a kaiju's face into a crater from close or medium range. On paper, this is the answer. This is the machine that was supposed to make every other Jaeger obsolete. Compare that to the oldest Mark I in the fleet. Still standing, still swinging, never once pulled from the line, Cherno Alpha wins by refusing to die. Stryker Eureka is engineered to never have to make that choice in the first place. Speed instead of desperation. A newer Mark instead of a battered veteran. 2 Hansons instead of a crew scraped together at the last minute. Herc and Chuck Hansen are father and son, which sounds like an advantage until you remember the drift means sharing a mind, and these two do not particularly want to share anything. Chuck resents his father for a war that took his mother. Herc resents Chuck for being exactly the kind of soldier Herc raised him to be. They pilot the fastest Jaeger ever built, while barely speaking to each other outside of combat, which is its own kind of miracle. 2 people who cannot get along on land, moving as one machine in the water. That is the cost nobody puts on the recruitment poster. And then the finale happens, Stryker. Eureka does not win the war by being fast. It does not win by outpunching a kaiju with its sting blades or carving one open with cluster missiles. Hurt goes down before the mission is finished. Hurt too badly to finish what he started. And it is Stacker Pentecost who climbs into that cockpit beside Chuck. Two men who were never trained to drift together fly straight down to the breach, arm the nuclear core, and turn the most advanced Jaeger on the planet into a bomb. Chuck dies inside it, and so does Pentecost. The machine that was supposed to make every other Jaeger obsolete gets used exactly once for its real purpose, and its real purpose is detonation. Fans will argue for hours about whether Striker Eureka is the meta-best Jaeger in the fleet. Fastest stats, highest mark number, best raw weapons loadout. Put it against Gypsy Danger with two neutral pilots, and it might genuinely win that fight. None of that matters in the only fight that counted. The tech tree tops out at Striker Eureka, and the tech tree still loses. Being the most advanced didn't buy Chuck Hansen a single extra minute with his father, who was already down and out before the bomb ever went off, so a battle-scarred machine kept fighting to survive an apocalypse, and the newest machine on Earth got wheeled out to end one by exploding. Different generations, same math. Two of the biggest, most advanced fighting machines humanity ever built both had to burn everything to matter. So what happens when the PPDC stops trying to build bigger and faster and instead straps three separate mines into one cockpit, betting an entire Jaeger on something no engineer had ever dared attempt? Crimson, Typhoon, 3 pilots, 3 arms, 0 seconds of mercy from the film that built it. Crimson Typhoon is the only Jaeger in the first film with a third arm bolted onto its frame, and that arm existed because the machine ran on a drift team nobody else in the fleet could replicate. Every other pairing in this story is 2 minds locked together, 1 drift, 2 nervous systems, and that's already hard enough to pull off without anyone losing themselves in the process. The Wei Tang triplets, Chung, Jin, and Hu, looked at that already difficult equation and made it 3. 3 brains, 3 nervous systems, 1 machine, all synchronized well enough to swing rotating saw blades in combinations a standard 2-pilot rig physically could not manage. That is not a small engineering flex. China's Mark IV was built specifically around that synergy, close combat efficiency, stacked directly on top of a neural link nobody else in the program had even attempted, let alone perfected. The theory going in was simple enough to explain in one breath. More minds in the drift means more precision. More limbs means more angles of attack the enemy has to account for, and a triplet bond already fused by biology means less friction than any 2 strangers could ever manage crammed into a shared headspace. On paper, Crimson Typhoon should have been the proof that bigger teams build better machines. Then Hong Kong happened. Otachi and Leatherback tear the third arm off within moments of engaging, and what was supposed to be the fleet's most ambitious experiment gets dismantled before it lands a single clean sequence of its own signature move. The saw blades barely get a moment to spin before they're gone. The triple pilot synergy the film spent its entire premise building toward never actually gets tested under real pressure, because the fight is over before the design gets a fair chance to prove or disprove anything at all. That is the part fans still bring up. Crimson Typhoon gets robbed of the one thing every other Jaeger in this story earns, a real showcase. Gypsy Danger gets its arc. The Australian team gets a proper stand. The 3-armed, 3-pilot flagship built to be China's answer to the apocalypse gets a handful of seconds and a scrap heap for its trouble. Nothing in the film confirms this outright, but follow where the evidence points. A single short scene is not enough to prove the 3-pilot system worked, and it is not enough to prove it failed either. What it does prove is something colder. The kaiju in Hong Kong did not care how bold the experiment was. Otachi and Leatherback did not slow down to respect the innovation sitting in front of them. And why would they? They hit the newest, most theoretically advanced machine in the fleet exactly as hard as they would have hit anything else. And it went down exactly as fast as anything else would have gone down too. 3 people climbed into that cockpit sharing 1 mind between them, betting their lives that synchronization alone could outfight the monster. It couldn't. Not because the idea itself was wrong, but because the fight never gave the idea a fair trial to begin with. That is the uglier version of the pattern this fleet keeps confirming, over and over. 1 machine at a time, 1 crew at a time. Spending yourself inside the machine was never a guarantee of anything. Sometimes you do not even get the chance to spend yourself before the machine spends you first. So if the boldest, newest design in the entire program can get erased before its own gimmick fires twice, what does that say about the machines built decades earlier, running on nothing but brute force and old steel? But if the newest experiment could fall that fast, what about the oldest machine still standing? A Cold War relic with one of the highest kill counts in the fleet and armor thick enough to make it look unkillable? Cherno Alpha. Nothing in the fleet had a kill record like this thing, and it still melted like an ice cube in a Russian summer. That contradiction is the whole point. Cherno Alpha was not some untested prototype hoping to survive its first real fight, praying its systems held together long enough to matter. It was one of the oldest Jaegers still standing, a Cold War brute built when the answer to every problem was simply more steel, more mass, more brute force applied directly to the problem until the problem stopped moving. It had already racked up one of the highest kaiju kill counts in the entire program before the movie even starts. This machine had seen things. This machine had won over and over long before anyone in Hong Kong needed saving. Alexis and Sasha Kaidanovsky did not pilot it like a weapon. They piloted it like a marriage. Married veterans sharing one drift, one mind, one set of reflexes honed over years of actual combat instead of simulations run in some safe testing bay. They were the couple every other crew got compared to and rarely matched. Like the Hansons before them, they climbed into a machine knowing exactly what the deal was. You share everything with the person you love, including the exact moment you might die, strapped side by side in the same collapsing metal skull. Look at what they were driving. Cherno Alpha does not have a face so much as a reactor dome welded onto a battleship. No blades, no missiles. Just incineration turbines and two hydraulic fists built to grab a kaiju, pin it, and grind it into the pavement through sheer sustained force. It is engineering as a threat. It says, I do not need to be clever. I just need to not let go, and for years, that was more than enough. And that reputation is exactly why its death still stings. In Hong Kong, Otachi does not outmuscle it, does not outfight it, does not even really fight it in the way the fists and turbines were designed for. Acid hits the head. The dome that made Cherno Alpha look invincible turns out to be the one part of the design nobody armored against a kaiju that fights with chemistry instead of claws. The tank goes down fast, and it goes down ugly, and none of that legendary kill count buys it even a few extra seconds. Fans have never fully forgiven that scene. The complaint runs the same way every time. A machine with that kill record should not die in minutes, so maybe the film cheated its legend just to raise the stakes for everyone watching. It is a thin read, resting more on how good this Jaeger looked on paper than on anything the movie actually contradicts. Nothing in canon says Cherno Alpha was ever built to survive an acid attack aimed at the one unprotected joint in its whole frame. Follow that thought, and the death stops looking like a nerf and starts looking like the design flaw it always was. Just one nobody had tested against until that day arrived, which makes it worse than the last machine that fell. A brand new experimental design dying fast is almost expected. The cost of testing something nobody has tried before. A battle-hardened veteran with more confirmed kills than most of the fleet combined, dying just as fast to a single unanticipated weak point means neither age nor youth, neither cutting-edge tech nor decades of proven brawling actually buys you survival. Alexis and Sasha do not get outfought. They get unmade by a wet spray of acid where their armor simply forgot to look. They went in together. They stayed together right up until the end, the way the drift always demands of the people inside it. And the wasteland did not care how many kills were sitting on their record before that morning started. Every Jaeger built so far has had to die to prove a point, and none of those deaths actually ended anything. So when the monsters came crawling back years down the line, the people left behind did not invent something new to answer them. They dug up the old hero, rebuilt it piece by piece, silhouette and all, and bet everything that history would not repeat itself, twice. Gypsy Avenger. The most advanced Jaeger ever built dies proving the exact same lesson as the one it was copied from, and that is not a coincidence. Gypsy Avenger rolls out as the Mark VI answer to everything wrong with the original. Dual-core reactor instead of a leaking nuclear heart, streamlined frame instead of brute force bulk, modular hardpoints that let it swap loadouts mid-fight like a soldier changing weapons on the move. On paper, this is the machine that finally solves the Jaeger problem. Less rust, more software. None of the analog stubbornness that got Gypsy Danger torn open twice. Jake Pentecost climbs into the drive suit as Stacker Pentecost's son, which means the legacy is not subtext. It is literally written into the pilot's last name. Nate Lambert takes the other hemisphere. Amara Namani joins the drift in the final battle, and just like that, the newest Jaeger in the fleet is being run by two rookies and a teenager, which is either terrifying or exactly the point. The gear alone reads like a wish list handed straight to the first film's engineers. An upgraded gravity sling, a chainsword 2.0, a shoulder-mounted plasma cannon that swaps in and out on command, 81 meters of hero-shaped machine with modular everything, built specifically to look like the icon it replaced while quietly being nothing like it underneath. That resemblance is not an accident, and the film does not pretend otherwise. Gypsy Avenger keeps the exact silhouette, the exact color scheme, the exact hero framing that made the original a legend. Every design choice says the same thing out loud. This is Gypsy Danger 2.0, rebuilt from the ground up to inherit the mythology along with the hardware. Fans are split on what that actually means. Some call it a genuine evolution. proof the franchise learned from its own mistakes and built something leaner and smarter. Others call it a reskin wearing a legacy paint job to earn emotional points it did not fully write for itself. Both readings agree on one thing, though. The film wants you thinking about the first Jaeger every single time you look at this one. And then the finale arrives, and every single upgrade stops mattering. Facing a mega kaiju bearing down on Mount Fuji, Gypsy Avenger does not win with the chainsword. It does not win with the plasma cannon. It wins by launching itself rocket-powered from high altitude and slamming its entire body into the creature, spending itself completely just to keep the monster from reaching the city. All that modular tech, all that power efficiency, and the winning move traces back to the same franchise instinct that closed out the original war. Throw the machine at the problem until the problem stops moving. Full stop. That instinct has history and it runs deep. Stacker Pentecost never got to make that call twice. He and Chuck Hansen made it once, aboard Striker Eureka, detonating its payload at the breach itself to seal it for good. Gypsy Danger's own ending came from inside the breach, too. A nuclear self-destruct that took the kaiju home with it. Two different machines, two completely different triggers. One identical decision underneath all of it. A pilot choosing to burn the hardware down to zero rather than let the mission fail. That is the part worth sitting with. A dual-core reactor did not save Jake Pentecost's Jaeger. A better sword did not save it either. 0 pieces of technology saved it. The only thing that ever works in this franchise, on this planet, is a person deciding the machine is worth less than the outcome and pulling the trigger on their own survival to prove it. Every rung up the tech ladder, from analog nukes to modular hardpoints. And the finish line never moves an inch. The machine gets smarter. The ending stays exactly as expensive as it always was. But if the machine was never the difference, then everything comes down to the person inside it. And the one who proves that isn't a legacy hero or a decorated veteran ace. It's the lightest, most fragile Jaeger in the entire fleet, piloted by someone who was never supposed to survive long enough to matter. Saber Athena. The thinnest armor in the entire franchise ends up deciding the biggest kaiju kill of the entire war, even though it never lands the finishing blow itself. That should not be possible. Every previous machine in this lineup won through mass, through cannons, through absorbing hits that would have folded a human body into paste. Saber Athena skips all of that. It shows up fast, orange and white, built like someone shaved a normal Jaeger down to its skeleton and called it done. The obvious criticism writes itself. Slim plating, digitigrade legs built for speed instead of impact, a frame that looks like it would crumple against anything that hit as hard as the machines it is standing next to. Fans loved the look the second it hit screens. Sleek, fast, genuinely gorgeous in motion. But plenty of the same fans looked at that armor and asked the obvious question, how does something this light survive a fight that has already killed heavier, better armed machines? It survives because it was never trying to win the way they did. Piloted by two cadets, Renata Gutierrez and Ryoichi Hatayama, at the controls through the Tokyo battle. Saber Athena carries twin energy blades that merge into a single double-ended sword. Not a cannon, not a chainsword built to tear through hide. A blade wielded with actual technique in a fight built around acrobatic martial arts style movement that looks like nothing else in this franchise. Every earlier Jaeger fought like a boxer. This one fights like a duelist. In the mega kaiju fight, that difference reshapes the whole outcome. Saber Athena takes real damage, plenty of it, and it never pretends otherwise. Instead of trading blows and hoping the armor holds, it targets limbs. Precise strikes, disabling joints and appendages one at a time, cutting the monster down piece by piece while the bigger machines around it take the punishment head on. The kaiju loses its legs to those strikes before it ever goes down, and Saber Athena pays for every one of them. The mega kaiju tears its legs off and impales it, taking the machine out of the fight entirely. Gypsy Avenger lands the actual kill, but by the time that finishing blow comes, the monster is already crippled, already stripped of the limbs it needed to keep fighting, and that work belongs to Saber Athena. That is the reveal sitting underneath every Jaeger this video has covered. The biggest one didn't win because it was big. The most advanced one didn't win because of its tech. Somewhere between the first launch and this last battle, the armor stopped being the variable that mattered, and nobody noticed because every machine before this one had enough of it to hide the truth. The Hatayamas were never supposed to be in that cockpit, and Renata was not far behind them. Cadets thrown into the deep end of a war that had already chewed through veterans in heavier machines with better numbers on paper. They climb in anyway, share a mind with the partner beside them, knowing exactly what that drift costs when it goes wrong. That is the same bet every pilot in this franchise made. Raleigh made it, Mako made it, the Hansens and the Kaidanovskis made it, and paid for it. Amara and Namani made it too, Embracer Phoenix, and then in Gypsy Avenger when the fight demanded it. The machine was never going to save any of them on its own. It was always going to spend them, and the only question was whether the person inside was good enough to make that spending count. Saber Athena just makes the math impossible to ignore. Strip away the armor, strip away the tonnage, strip away every excuse a bigger hull gives a mediocre pilot to survive a bad decision, and what's left is skill or nothing. This machine had nothing else to hide behind. It got torn apart doing the job anyway, and the job still got done. Every Jaeger in this lineup was built on the same premise, that enough engineering could outmuscle the apocalypse. Every single one of them proved that premise wrong the moment a human being had to climb inside and make the actual choice that mattered. The armor was never the weapon. The pilot always was. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.